Hello everybody, welcome back to C&S Corvettes in beautiful sunny Sarasota, Florida. It's your Corvette buddy Lyle here to talk to you about more interesting, exciting, and helpful Corvette stuff. Today we're going to be talking about a very unique car that was kind of Corvette adjacent. It's little brother in a fancier suit, I guess. Today let's cover a brief history of the Cadillac XLR. As many of my viewers may remember, in the late 80s and early 90s, Cadillac really wanted to retain its title of, basically best car in the world. And they figured the best way to do that would be to make a halo, world-class, two-seat roadster to best all of the German offerings at that time. They went to Europe and they found a bunch of very specialized European manufacturers, and they spent a metric ton of cash with places like Pininfarina, the design house that designed all the Ferraris up until the last 10 years, to design and build the body of this roadster that's going to be called the Allante. So this car was designed and the body was assembled and painted at Pininfarina in Italy, then put on a boat and shipped over to Michigan to where the chassis, the engine, and everything else was assembled. And it wasn't a bad car, but the problem was they had invested so much into it that it was extremely expensive for what it was, and it really didn't stand up to the European competition at the time. So Cadillac said, you know what? We've learned from this mistake, and we are not going to make the same mistake twice. Actually, no, you're going to make all different ones. Anyway, they decided that they were going to do another top halo level roadster. But this time they were going to be smart about it. In 1999, they put on the show circuit a concept car called the Evoque, and it was stunning, absolutely gorgeous, the future of Cadillac performance. Fast forward to 2004, and GM introduces to the world the 2004 Cadillac XLR, which is largely based on the shape and the look of the Evoque concept car. It was also basically on the under the skin, and other than the interior and the engine and the transmission, it was a C6 Corvette. So it had the same hydroformed frame rails, it had the same good suspension components, a lot of things from the C6 were under the skin of this new Cadillac. They had projected to sell between 5,000 and 7,000 of these cars a year, but in actuality, highest production was in 2005 at only 3,730 units. As I told you, they were meaning this car to beat the competition, which at that time, their key component was the SL Roadster from Mercedes and other $100,000 plus European roadsters. But the idea was, we're going to provide them with that look and that experience for a lower price. Well, what they found was that value pricing doesn't work when you have a market that is focused on snob appeal, okay? People who are going to spend $120,000 on a roadster want to be able to show up to their country club or to their friend's house or to the golf course in something that everybody looks at and goes, oh yeah, that's nice. That's a good car. Cadillac doesn't have that cachet, and this was their problem. So instead of doing what they did with the Allante and throwing tons of cash at it to try to make something completely different, they used the already well-known and competent chassis that they had developed for the C6 and based the car on that, figuring this has got to be a surefire win because we are not overly investing this time. And they put some nice stuff in it. It had the magnetic ride shocks. It had this absolutely gorgeous convertible hardtop assembly that all upper line roadsters had at that time. And they actually sourced that mechanism from the same supplier that provided the mechanisms to Mercedes for their SL. Some of the other things that they contributed to this to bring it specialness was it had a 32 valve dual overhead cam Northstar 4.6 liter V8, very smooth engine, but not particularly powerful. It only had 320 horses, which was about on par with where the Europeans were at that time. Later on, they introduced the supercharged XLR-V, which had the same engine, but with a big supercharger slapped on it. And that was making 443 horsepower, and that was equivalent to the AMG 55 of the time. 5-speed automatic for the base cars, 6-speed automatic, same one that was in the Corvette, for the V versions. The base price of this car was $75,385. The V started at $97,485, but by '09, when they ended production, that had ballooned to $104,000. As I mentioned, the showpiece was this folding hardtop. They had a bunch of beautiful wood in there, and this, that, and the other, and they had the instruments and the clock were designed by Bulgari, the luxury watchmaker. Again, they wanted to have European flair at an American price. However, it didn't work. In fact, when they ended production in '09, it took them 2 years to sell the last of the XLRs that they had, the final 13 selling in 2011. And I would bet they sold at a fairly deep discount. So what does this teach us? The idea was to develop this new Cadillac on top of the existing Corvette to keep costs down because, being able to offer this $100,000 Roadster at $75,000 or $85,000, they should have brought in everybody to buy that car. And it was, by all metrics, a good car. Road and track, car and driver. Everybody said, it's a really nice car. The problem is the market didn't care about the discount. The market wanted the recognized mark, the recognized brand, and the assumption of quality that comes with those brands. Today, the XLR suffers from some serious depreciation and even moreover, a lack of support from GM. Specific XLR parts are very, very difficult to find if you need them. Because of that, you can easily buy a decent XLR base model for under 20 grand all day long, and you can get a V, and you have to look to find the right one for you if you want that, between $30,000 and $45,000. So clearly they are bringing a little less, or considerably less, talking the base, than a comparable C6 Corvette. But it is a very beautiful car. It is an interesting experiment, and I don't know if we're going to see Cadillac try that again. Now, my question to you, do you think we might see a rear-engined Cadillac supercar based on the C8 architecture? Do you think they'll learn from the mistakes of the past and actually make something that everybody really wants? Or do you think they're just going to continue to make regular cars and then, like the new Celestiq, their new $450,000 car for the ultra-rich, and just skip over the $100,000 to $150,000 price range entirely? I don't know. What do you think? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.